Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And when it comes to news, well, we just have a new Pulse video that sort of announces that the renovations in GTA 4.4 are getting close to being completed. Could even be next week, although I don't think it was actually confirmed there. But there should also be a stream on the CCP Twitch channel on Tuesday about the renovations and some of the changes that are coming to the game, with of course changes to the super carriers. We did a couple mass tests when it comes to that new recloner functionality. And then of course we also have the changes to the bounty system in nullsec that are bound to have a pretty major impact on the market, at least for the short term. More on that in just a little bit. Well, basically the market in EVE Online is sort of self-correcting, at least quite heavily. Next up, let's take maybe a quick look at the new Eden store. Now, I have not been able to fix it. Must also say that I haven't really looked into it. But what I'm noticing now is that if I go for price descending, if I go for name ascending, and if I go for name descending, you can see that my front page is always the same. So it must be one of my settings that's not working or something like that. Or perhaps there is just something that is not working properly with the New Eden store in general at the moment. So what I am going to do is take up one of your suggestions, and I'm just going to go for the services tab, of course, because that one, if we have a sale here, that could actually have a nice impact on the market. Like if Omega Clone Time is on sale, you can expect a lot of demand for Plex all of a sudden, so that would be something to definitely look into. But skill extractors are also something, and the daily alpha injectors are all things that have potentially got an impact on the markets. For now, 10 skill extractors, is that a sale? I don't think so. That's just a bundle discount that you get. So one is for 140, 10 would be 1400 plex, but it's discounted to 1120 because you're buying a whole package. So nothing special to report here just yet, and that means that we move on to the market. And as always, we're starting with our plex and stuff, coming in at 230. There we go. So let's get started. Here is the plex chart. More hesitation with a slight edge up. You can also see that from the ticker we're up just a little bit in the price of Plex, but it's definitely nothing major just yet. We're talking about 2.85 million for the sellers in GTA 4.4. Buyers are almost at 2.7, and then the gap usually closes when it comes to the Tranquility Trading Tower. Indeed, it's 2.8 million, pretty much on the money in the Tranquility Trading Tower, and then the buyers go up to just shy of 2.7 million. Still that narrow band of trading that's happening for Plex at the moment, and it's not really deciding on, well, we're going up, we're going down, which, well, if we look at the totality of what's happening in EVE Online at the moment, I think is actually quite normal. A lot of ISK is currently flowing into minerals, into resources that need to be gathered by players manually. CCP's goal has been to make that more worthwhile, and as a result those costs go up. That makes potentially for a very inflationary situation, because goods becoming rarer, but the ISK faucet staying open, that should mean that ISK itself becomes a little bit less valuable, and so Plex themselves could go up in price because of that. But now we also see, of course, that CCP is looking at rebalancing the ISK faucets as well. They're putting in the dynamic bounty system in 0.0, and I personally believe that this is just a start. They're probably gonna look at missions, at incursions, at everything in order to keep everything nice and balanced. And at least for now, this seems to be reflected in the price of Plex, that is holding very steadily a good chunk away from 3 million, which, well, it's still decently heavy if you look at it historically, or decently expensive. Almost 1.5 billion for a month is still quite a lot of work, but on the other hand, it's holding steady here. We don't have like this massive inflationary spike or anything like that that's happening either. For the multiple pilot train certificates, we have this more wavy move, but once we reach 1.4 billion, we do tend to be dropped back down, probably by new supply. supply. Let's take a quick look at that. 1.4 billion for the sellers, 1.3 billion for the buyers. Geez, that 1.44 billion. So I do suspect that it's actually not just more filling up, although you have a little bit more sellers coming in. But yeah, on some days you have people that are a bit impatient, and so they're willing to pay 1.4 billion for one of these items. And then on some other days you're going down towards the 1.3 billion halfway average. So that's when, all right, you get some people grabbing it from the sellers, but also a couple of people dumping to those buyers. Volumes are still, of course, very low for this expensive item. After that, we have the skill extractors, mirroring Plex very closely. That hesitation is very clear, staying below the 330 million mark. Sellers are at 315, buyers are at 305. A 10 million margin on something that costs 300 million is very narrow yet again. So here market is hesitating. What's the impact on the skill injectors? The large skill injectors are continuing their downtrend and are actually reaching a 1-year low point. 660 million for the sellers, 640 for the buyers. That's not good. I actually have or for me personally, I should say, because I actually have a large skill injector that I bought at a certain price point, and it was definitely higher than this one. I think just below 700 or something like that. I think here it's a combination. The market is starting to hesitate on Plex. Will we see more inflation? Well, if CCP keeps tinkering to the ISK faucets, that may not be the case, and their fight against bots is probably also keeping the pressure on Plex prices. And then of course at the moment it's the holiday season that's starting, and CCP is being very generous with skill points, so there is really no need to massively go after large skill injectors in order to inject characters and things like that. All of that demand is probably down a little bit with how generous CCP is at the moment, and that is actually leading to a 1-year low point heading towards 650 million on the chart. The small scale injector under these circumstances I think would do the same thing. Yes, they are. They're also dropping off 5-day moving average. Also, I think just on the 1-year low point here, 135 million for the sellers, 126 million for the buyers. And then we have our daily alpha injectors that are truly their own little market, staying above 45 million ISK. Despite the fact you could say that all the other injectors are down in price. We just saw from the New Eden store that the daily alpha injectors are basically directly tied to Plex, and I think you can also buy them directly from CCP. I'm not 100% sure about that, but they're staying at 45 million. They're actually at a 1-year high point pretty much, completely reversed from the other skill injectors. I think that this is showing that the Alpha Clone program is very successful at the moment. 46.5 million for the sellers, 42.5 million for the buyers. And then of course the real question is, are we talking veteran players that are creating massive amounts of accounts, or lots of new people that are trying the game? I don't have any evidence for that, but I'm leading towards the second bit here. EVE has come into the news a little bit with the war. I think lots of people are trying to check it out from that perspective. But then, of course, all of the changes that are happening as well, the events may have drawn some people back. And that is true, but overall I do think that we're seeing a lot of new players try the game. I actually spent a little bit of time in help channel, and it was very noticeable there, in my opinion, that we have quite a few new players. And what's really interesting as well is a dynamic that seems to have returned, which is something that was also present when I first started playing EVE Online, that I noticed quite a little bit, is this hesitation to upgrade to a larger ship. Is this the right time for me to go from my cruiser into a battle cruiser? Am I really going to spend 200 million ISK on a battleship already, or should I play it safe and make a little bit more ISK before I actually do that? So the value of items, I do feel, has gone up, especially for newer players, and you can say that this is a problem, that this is something that is going to deter players. For a lot of people, I do think it will, but for the players that do eventually get hooked on EVE Online, I think this is actually pretty massive. This feeling, this dread of losing that new ship that you managed to scrounge together through your hard-earned efforts, you know, that is something that's very unique to EVE, and I feel like it is making a comeback if I look at the help channel. And then finally we've got the hypercore as well, that's diving back down below the 300,000 ISK range, 290 pretty much for the sellers, 280 for the buyers, pretty narrow margin. This one, I'd see that as a general gauge for activity in the game, so that may be down a little bit, perhaps with the rush of the invasion being over, that may have put a little bit of a downer on some activity in the game. It's also definitely true that it's taken away quite a bit of content now that Pokven has been established, because all of the invasion stuff was actually accessible through many different types of for many different types of players. You had the emerging conduits that at first were very accessible for solo players, battleship stuff, I love that personally myself. You had fleet stuff, you had smaller stuff, you had mining stuff. All of that basically being gone now has a pretty big impact, I think, on how HiSec feels at the moment. But this is the direction that CCP is taking, and well, we'll see where the story goes next. Let's move on to the minerals next, coming in at 1040. Like that. And this was actually what I was talking about when it comes to those ISK faucets and things like that. Look at the downwards pressure on the price of titanium, pretty much a straight line back down below 8 ISK on the average price. We're talking, if we go to Cheetah, is this in Tranquility Trading Tower? Yeah, some aggressive selling here, down to 750. And in Cheetah, which is where my ticker is based on, we're at 795 for the sellers and 734 for the first buyer, 715 for the for most of them. So this is definitely quite a bit of pressure, putting us right back on the yearly average. And I personally feel like, yeah, the player base, the economy in EVE Online is actually pretty resilient to changes like this. Players are willing to change their focus, and whatever becomes harder to do but more valuable will then find more players willing to put more hours into that activity. I personally think that mining in HiSec will be up, that there is new and fresh supply that is coming in for Veldspar, for titanium, and that is currently putting pressure on that price back to, well, it's still a pretty damn good price. 8 ISK for titanium is not bad at all. But it's not outlandishly good like 10 is, of course. So there is going to be quite a big difference. A 20% loss in ISK per hour is decently significant, but we're nowhere near the 4-5 ISK and even worse before that. Although titanium always held up decently well because it is the bulkiest. But this is to me a sign that the players are adapting and that they're actually very much able to bring the supplies back and bring the prices down as a result of that. For pyrite, things seem to be a little bit different. All right, I was actually expecting this to happen sooner, but pyrite is actually climbing to a one-year high point, and this to me is also pretty interesting. 18 ISK for the sellers, 15 ISK for the buyers. Now this really to me cements the inversion being corrected. Pyrite is less abundant per cubic meter of ore than titanium, and so a logic that doesn't necessarily hold up. Of course, it demands it depends on many more factors than just how much is available, but some logic does say that it should be more expensive than titanium, and now it is more expensive than titanium. Once again, about double the price. Pretty impressive increase in price, and so this is very nice. I must also, I think, quickly mention this here. Titanium at 7 to 8 ISK even before the resource bonanza and during the resource bonanza was a great price and a normal price for titanium. Pyrite reaching 18 ISK I think is still on the low side, but 5 and 7.5 is crazy low for pyrite. Something that before, let's say, the Rorcal changes to who were able to just outmine everything and strip mine continuously all day every day in nullsec, this was really super low in price, something that we'd never seen before, and it caught up to titanium because of the unique situation that we found ourselves in. And so now that we see that reversing, to me it's very interesting, and it is showing in part that at least some logic in the dynamic of minerals being harder to get, more rare in its availability in the ore mixes, should mean more expensive, and that is what seems to be happening here. So a side product doesn't become completely valueless because it is just overmined so much. Let's take a look at Mixalon next. That one is holding on very impressively at a price above 100 ISK, 113 for the sellers and 99 for the buyers. That is still very expensive. I think even historically speaking, 75, 80 ISK for Mixalon is already expensive. So this to me feels like that would be Tritanium still holding on to a 9 to 10 ISK price range. This really feels like it is harder to get and like it has become more expensive for the market itself. So this is very impressive and good news, of course, because in HiSec you can still grab Tritanium, which is down, but you can also grab Pyrite, which is up a lot, and you can grab Mixalon as well. So there's definitely still strong incentive, I would say, to mine in HiSec. There's still value there. 113.5 for the sellers, very expensive. 99 ISK for the buyers. They're trying to stay below 100 ISK, but the pressure still seems to be quite high, and the average price is well above 100 ISK. And then this is the other reverse. Isogen should or used to be more expensive than Mixalon. Let's see where it's at the moment. Well, it's yo-yoing a little bit, unfortunately. Unfortunately, that's from my perspective. Still at around 50% of the value of Mixalon. So Isogen is going for 50 ISK on the sellers, 46.71 for the buyers. I'm going to take a quick look at volumes for Mixalon here. 5 million, 6 million, 11 million, 15 million, right? You can see those are some of the bigger orders that are coming in. And then let's take a look at Isogen, 15 million, 18 million, and then down here, 2 million, 2 million, 10 million. So this bit feels a little bit more natural, but then down here we get another 28 million surrounded by way more. This is basically 50 million units coming to the market, another 50, another 30, another 30 down here at 52.80, another 50 round at 57.95. So this is a sign for me at least that, and here another 76 million ISK units of Isogen, that this is really the bottleneck that is still having to go through old reserves from that have been accumulated during the mining bonanza. I've quite often said this during EVE Talk. I think this kind of confirms it, is that Isogen has always been the largest casualty of the super availability and the much higher mining yields that CCP introduced into the game. It was just not needed at all compared to the numbers that were being pulled by the player base in general, and as a result it is struggling to get back to a price that to me would feel logical, which would be above the price of Mixalon. And it also, you know, this stuff used to be like way more expensive than Mixalon. I think 150 was actually like even a normal to slightly low price for Isogen, and it dropped down to 10 ISK. So that is of course I think another one of those signs that this one was really struggling and being massively oversupplied. I think it still stocks. I really think, looking at these numbers, that it's still other players, and you can see that there's actually quite a bit of competition happening in that arena as well. Alright, 52, you know, let's try to sell our stocks. It lost for a little bit, but then someone sells. I've got another 50 million at 52.25 if anyone wants to buy it. And then another one comes in. I don't think that this is freshly mined Isogen in low sec, to be honest. So very interesting dynamic. I would say Isogen is lagging behind, and potentially, if those supplies do end up getting dried up, it could overtake Mixalon. So that's an interesting perspective, I think, for the longer term. And then we have Noxium next, that's also holding on to a price that I think historically is accurate. Yeah, I think 1100 ISK was definitely possible for Noxium. We are talking 1200 for the sellers and 1000 ISK for the first buyer. Decent gap that's starting to open up. I would not be surprised if we actually go down a little bit here, because this is of course a pretty big rush up as well. Started the year at 250 ISK, ends at 1250 or 1200. 4 to 5 times the price. That is quite a lot to maintain, and so this may go down a little bit as supplies from lowsec and nullsec and perhaps other sources as well find their ways to the market. I would not be surprised on that, but don't expect 250 or 500 ISK to come back anytime too soon. Some pressure is possible, but not a major crash, I don't think so. After that, we have Zydrine. That's also showing that same pattern, pretty much actually, yeah, mirror chart right here. A little bit of pressure at the tail end, but coming from 1 year high point. Zydrine, same thing, went up to like 1400 disc here, I think. What is this one? 1400 disc. So that is not really that sustainable. There's some people that can make and bring some isogen and sell at a slightly better price here. So we are down to 1266 for the sellers, 1240 for the buyers. So that's a much smaller margin than for Noxium, and so I would say that, yeah, this is that same logic again. Noxium more available than Zydrine, so it should be a little bit cheaper. Putting that one down to like the 1100 disc range, I think makes a lot of sense. But for Zydrine, yeah, the market is just willing to pay up 1240 for any Zydrine that can be brought to the market, and so it's some supplies that are pushing the price down in that same range. But look at the volumes as well. 100,000, 600,000, a million units is the biggest order. We used to have 30 million Zydrine, hundreds of millions of Zydrine, I think sometimes even during the height of the bonanza. That would just crash the price down to 500 and keep it there. Although, no, I also have to be honest, what was really putting a lot of pressure was just a large number of 3 for 10 million units because of moon mining. So you had an enormous amount of corporations that it could in 0.5 systems just generate a lot of Zydrine as well. So it was not like, all right, I've got so much Zydrine, I'm putting 100 million units on the market, and that's never gonna move, the price never gonna move above that. But it was just so many corporations that together basically had that impact on the market, because they could bring in 3, 4 and tens of millions for like a larger corporation with a couple of moons on a very regular basis. That seems to be over. And then finally we get our other inversion that's still lagging behind, but at least it kind of wants to go up here, which is Megasite. Megasite used to be more expensive than Zydrine, not by a lot, but it is, I think, the lowest volume per cubic meter of all of these Tech 1 related minerals. And as a result, at the moment, we're still paying 765 for the sellers, 737 for the buyers. And here again, that slight difference, 4 million units, 3 million units, another 4, another 5, another 47.5 million units. It could be some reserve from old supplies, or there could still be like a supply line for Megasite open that is keeping that price in check. We're still at a 1 year high point, pretty nice gains for the year as well for Megasite. And here I don't have the actual answers. Is this old reserves, just like with Isogen, that are keeping the reverse from recovering? I mean, it just needs like 400 disc. It's a 50% jump though, and then we're back in the right range. But we'll see what happens, of course, when it comes to Megasite. And then finally we have the Morphite market that is finally stabilizing after reaching a peak of 40,000 disc. I don't think I'd ever seen that before. 26,000 for the sellers and 24,000 for the buyers. Still very expensive Morphite at the moment. Probably compared to the historical price range, I think that this is gonna end up being one of the real winners that is going to have a sustainable, much higher price range, unlike for instance Tritanium that's already recovering from, I think, activity in HiSec. Alright, interesting stuff in my opinion, showing that we're still rebalancing some of these strange situations. For instance, Tritanium being more expensive than Pyrite are reversing, and Tritanium to me shows the resilience of the EVE Online player base in the ability to, all right, we're gonna scale up our HiSec activities, we're gonna make more Tritanium there, since that's the unique source of it, and that is already putting the price back into a normal range. Next up, we've got PI coming in at 23.30. There we go, and of course, well, that's still a decent amount of ISK flowing into an actively created resource category, which is the minerals. So PI still struggling. I think it's going to be the name of the game. Broadcast nodes down to 1.5 million and staying there, just above that for the sellers, 1.4 million for the buyers. That is of course a very bad price. Construction blocks falling off a final cliff, perhaps. Jesus Christ, right? 10,000 disc, actually low average for construction blocks over the year. I think 11 to almost 12k was easily possible historically speaking. We are down to 7,400 for the first seller, 7.5 for most, 5,700 ISK for the buyers. That is of course really bad for people that want to make a lot of ISK from PI. At least from like more base PI. Perhaps in higher tiers there are still some niches, but at the moment, yeah, it's not looking good in general. Consumer electronics staying at the low end of the range as well, between 7,500 and 9,000 ISK. Yeah, 9,000 for the sellers, 6,800 for the buyers. Really big gaps opening up, and this despite the fact that we're actually seeing a decent number of buyers compared to the number of sellers. So it's just, I think it is oversupply, but it is also just ISK not flowing, not being available for the passively created stuff anymore. So PI becoming the first casualty. After that, we have coolants, basically settling in the 7,500 to 9,000 ISK range as well here. 8,600 for the sellers, 7,800 for the buyers. We're just gonna keep going. Cryoprotectant solutions tied to implant production. Definitely, I feel one of the categories that seem to try to hold on a little bit more to average prices, but the pressure is on here. We're actually reaching 100,000 on the on the chart, and it's 105,000 for the sellers, 88,000 for the buyers. That bottom seems to be dropping off as well. Now, for the longer term, I would say it's become a little bit more risky. I was really looking forward to trying these investments, hoping for Edencom implants to come, and then to make a lot of risk on that trade. But of course, at the moment, the general situation is already unknown. Are we looking at inflation? Are we looking at deflation? It's very hard to say. And then the Edencom Trig situation has basically stalled in a way. Pogvin has been established, and which we'll look at for the extra stuff. Trig stuff has gone up in price because of a lack of availability, and perhaps I've been starting to think that perhaps CCP wants it that way, wants Trig stuff to be decently rare but very expensive, wants Edencom stuff to be very rare and very expensive as well. Omega only, to fly that and to lose that. Perhaps CCP wants it to really hurt. So it's a possibility, and that to me would mean that don't look for implants anytime too soon, don't look for super availability anytime too soon, so don't look for a massive amount of demand for Edencom implants either. So I'm not sure if I still want to buy basically that cryoprotectant solutions here at 90,000 ISK. Everything is up in the air a little bit at the moment, which is interesting in a sandbox, of course. Definitely feels like a shakeup. Enriched uranium confirming the trend of being at the low end of the range. Very, expensive, generally speaking, for a PI material tied to fuels. You can see where we come from, almost 15,000 ISK at the high end. We are now selling for less than 10,000, buyers coming in at 8,700. Integrity response drones confirming the trend. I think we can go a little bit more quickly on this one unless we find like an exception, but yeah, mechanical parts trading at around 8,500 on average range. Nanites tied to implants as well. You can see that we're playing with that 5,000 ISK, which is also the market I was looking for. If that had happened a couple of months ago, I'd probably have jumped in on some nanites below 5,000 ISK, but now again I'm not so sure anymore. Nano factories also trading 1 million at the start of the year, probably already not very expensive. 840,000 for the sellers, less than 800,000 for the buyers. That's 20% down in price right here. That's not even the worst of them. Organic mortar applicators not yet at a 1-year low point, but started at 1.1 million and is now at 875, 800,000 for the buyers again. So again, 20% down in price. Recursive computing module down a third of the price, started at 1.5 million, ends up at 1 million ISK. Where are those buyers? 952 or 953,000, and look at here, yeah, any new supply is just gonna keep putting pressure on that price. Not good. Robotics, Jesus, I never thought we would see that, to be honest. Breaks through 70,000 ISK, something that normally costs 100,000 ISK, decently reliably, pretty consistent, pretty constant. Nope, 71,000 for the sellers, 68,000 for the buyers. That to me feels like a historically low price for robotics. Self-harmonizing power cores, a little bit of a bounce back to 1.5 million, but it is from a 1-year low point. So yeah, again, some investors are still here looking at PI. Perhaps they can snag some of the cheap stuff. But what's definitely not happening is, all right, we're gonna just massively buy and get the price back to 2 million. No one is crazy enough to do that. 1.5 for the sellers, 1.3 million for the buyers. Again, a lack of buyers, very notable. Sterile conduits was one of the exceptions, managed to get back to that 1.3 million on, I think, the announcements of the hypercore and the hope of a bit more creation and destruction happening in the structure segment. But yeah, in the end, I think now just completely dominated by the same forces. You call me superconductors, still a ways off, but I can also see a little bit of pressure, so I would love to buy that below 50,000. It's still at 61,000 for the buyers. I say sterile conduits, you call me conductors, the ones that are slightly better than the rest when it comes to their performance here. Wet-dry mainframes, again playing with that 1.5 million low point, buyers are below that. And average price not that much above this, so you can clearly see that people are dumping straight to these buyers even now. So PI, yeah, it is the biggest casualty, I would say, of all of the changes done by CCP. It is very passive, and as a result, the value of that tends to drop now. Next up, advanced wood materials, 3040. Let's take a look at those. We'll start crystalline carbonite. So that one actually went to a 1-year high point up to 175 and is now recovering, getting back to a 150 range, 154 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. Couple of days, couple of million units coming in here now and then, basically plugging that gap decently, quickly and effectively, but we're staying at an average normal price. Next carbide is titanium carbide for Caldari production. So a bit over a week ago we also went up to 180 ISK, but now we do seem to have dropped off below average. 160 for the sellers, 151 for the buyers. Yeah, 14 million, another 6 million, another 8 million. That's interesting, not what I expected. Let's take a look at the next ones before we try to analyze this. So we have next carbide, that's for Amar. We still have the Minmatar, Fernite carbide for Minmatar. Alright, this one is actually slowly moving away from that bottom. Average price could be 140-ish almost. It's 134 for the sellers and 127 for the buyers. Ooh, 31 million units here is gonna keep things in check quite a little bit at 135. So that one is slowly recovering from a bad spot. And then tungsten carbide is actually back down well below average all of a sudden. 171 for the sellers, 166 for the buyers on 27 million here, 17 million here. Doesn't feel like it is just massively oversupplied. Okay, interesting. I don't have a too good a read on this one because I don't know exactly what's behind the supply lines for this, but it does feel like we get a little bit of volatility coming back. Players taking advantages of high points, and then we do have a slow recovery when it comes to below average prices. That one seems to just be edging on very, very slowly, but it is at least recovering and heading back towards average prices here for Fernite carbide. So I don't know if the regional differences, right, the spreading out of the trade hubs has increased volatility. Perhaps by slowing down the supply market itself a little bit, that's a possibility. But we're definitely seeing everything slowly come together, I would say, everything towards the same range. And yeah, more volatility all of a sudden. Pretty interesting. I'm actually gonna grab a drink. Like that, we're about halfway anyways, and then let's take a look at the metamaterials next, see if there's an impact there. Galente 1.2, here is photonic metamaterials. Alright, that's definitely different. 1 year low point, very, very pronounced. 11,500 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. Yeah, this is a 1 year low point. Let's take a look at the next one, non-linear metamaterials. All right, bit of pressure, but double the price, 22,000 for 720 for the sellers and almost 22,000 for the buyers. What a difference. So here we do still have a very, very big difference between Caldari and Galente. And then we have Minmatar, which is plasmonic. Metamaterials definitely struggling as well, getting for another 1 year low point, 15,000 for the sellers, less than 14,000 for the buyers. And finally we have Terahertz Metamaterials, that's also dropping off to a 1 year low point. 15,500 for the sellers, 13,200 for the buyers. This would be an indication that for some reason Caldari Tech 2 is expensive, very much in demand. I'm not sure about that. If anyone can confirm or deny that or has an explanation, definitely feel free to put that in the comments. But it's a massive difference. Minmatar and Amar 15k, which is definitely below average, a pretty cheap price at the moment. Galente just fell off a cliff down to 11,000 disk, and then we have those non-linear metamaterials still very expensive, right on the yearly average at double the price of Galente metamaterials. That's a surprisingly strong performance here for a single metamaterial. You usually see a little bit more trend. So while I'm seeing the carbides come together a little bit, metamaterials are definitely showing differences depending on which Tech 2 production is happening. And then we get the rest of the advanced boom material stuff. Unfortunately here we're gonna go over this pretty quickly because I'm expecting, just like last week, same pattern as with PI. You can see fermionic condensates, another 1 year low point down to 70k, started the year at 90. Ferrogel just not stopping, straight through 30,000 discs, started the year at 40, is now at 29,000 for the sellers and 26,400 for the buyers. Then we have our fulleриdes that are below 750, at least they're stopping a little bit. Well, yeah, we also lost a quarter of the price from the average, and at a high point we went up to 1,500, so that's half the price there. Hypersynaptic fibers trading at 10,000 disk, again the low end of the range. Nano transistors trading at 4,000 disk, also lost like 50, almost 50% if you look at the high end of the range here. Then we have the phenolic composites, that one slowly trying to crawl out of the hole, but yeah, the former average 2,100 disk, we're just not getting anywhere close to that. It's around 1,600 here for phenolic composites. And then we have our ceramic fibers that are, well, doing a little bit better. You always have to have one exception, of course. Start the year at 350, ends the year at around 350, but is definitely climbing out of a very difficult situation. And I would not be surprised if new supplies like here, 47 million units all of a sudden, a couple of minutes ago, is going to drive that price back well below average very quickly. So it's definitely a two-lane category here in advanced movements. Tied to Tech 2 production, you get some volatility, you get some strong exceptions with expensive prices, you could say, but then everything else, yeah, oversupplied, not a lot of risk available for that market, and so definitely generally playing with 1 year low points. Let's take a look at our Tech 2 ships next. 3730. Like that. Alright, here is the Basilisk. Did really well last week and is still in a very strong play, around 240 million on the chart, 243 million for the sellers, 222 for the buyers. So if you bought the dip below 200 million ISK, you're looking at a very nice sell opportunity right now in the Basilisk. And then if you look at the previous two segments, you would think, well, is this flowing out of a lot of markets just to fill the base Tech 1 production cycle? It looks like in Tech 2 we have some volatility that is starting to show up. Basilisk is definitely playing at its low point at the moment, which is a very nice sell opportunity. Next up here we've got the Cerberus. That one is, you know, a little bit more shy, although on the day that we sprung up here we did go up to 280 million apparently. For the 5-day moving average, for instance, we're staying below 250, we're at 246 million for the sellers, 221 for the buyers. The low point I think was at the 190 range on the buy side, so a small trade that you could have made, not as good as the Basilisk, probably percentage wise, but it's there, and we'll see where we go from here. Volumes are definitely up for the Cerberus. I think this could be tied to the event, of course. If there's another ship that is going to run the current sites, I do think the Cerberus is going to be it. Next up here, we've got the Guardian, another one that jumped up from 180 million, very pronounced 1 year low point, up to 230. Not that big, not as great as 300 million, of course. We're right now in the recovery phase from that. It's 202 million for the sellers, 182 for the buyers, so we could get back into buy opportunity very quickly. This was a slight trade to be made. Right now, we'll see if volatility can continue. Then we've got the Hound, a little bit disappointed, right? I personally love the stealth bombers, and I think you can see on the first part of the chart why, right? Buy below 25, sell above 30, buy below 25, sell at almost 35, buy below 25, sell above 35, buy below 25 again, sell at above 35. I mean, you had quite a few opportunities in the last year for the stealth bombers. I think I took 3 of these waves myself for 4 trades, so very good. Then it is disappointing to see this slow burn up above 25, and it's just meandering around this range at the moment. But all right, we'll see where we go from here. Of course, 26 million for the sellers, 22 million for the buyers. You could probably try to buy one if you're hoping for another spike up to 35 million, but in the last couple of months, basically volatility has died down quite substantially. The Iki Tursa for Trig stuff, right? Definitely showing that the increased cost is starting to weigh on the market. Goes from 400 million up to 700 million for 715 for the sellers, 644 million for the buyers. And yeah, I'm gonna quickly mention that again. This could be perhaps CCP's plan. Trig stuff, Edencom stuff, not necessarily in line with the new empires, but rather something that for now is a lot more rare and a lot more expensive, a real commitment if you're gonna go the Triglavian or Edencom way. After that, we've got the Ishtar, much more general ship, I would say, useful in PvP, useful in PvE, just generally considered a very strong platform, and that one may just be in big enough volumes that the general trend here is weighing on the Ishtar. Definitely trading well below average, 213 million for the sellers, 194 million for the buyers. I think this could be one of those ships where, yeah, the fact that Galente materials, for instance, are down quite a little bit, that this is starting to weigh on this ship. After that, we have the Manticore, again a little bit disappointed with the volatility of this one. We did go down to a very nice 1 year low point. You probably could have bought these for like 23 to 22 million ISK. Right now they are selling for 27 almost. Buyers coming in also at 26.6, so there's definitely a little bit of competition happening in the Manticore in order to grab them, but we would of course love to have seen that happen above 30 million. After that, we have the Munin that is also just slowly pulling away from that low point and staying above 200 million, 209, excuse me, for the sellers, 190 million for the buyers. Of course, we would love to see this again, but so far, yeah, the Imperium hasn't felt the need, it seems, to just massively buy lots of Munins. The Nemesis next, same story I would say, although the Hound has been the picture perfect of what we want the Tech 2 ship market to be like. It was definitely better in the first part of the chart here with highs up to 30 million, a low at 20, back up to 28.5, but here we got to 30 again. We got down here, you could have probably bought at 22 and another 30 million high, and then a super pronounced low where you could have taken advantage of here, but then we are starting to be a little bit more limited in the scope of things. 24 million for the sellers, 21.6 million for the buyers. Same story as with the Hound, I would say. Buying below 22 million, if you look at this chart, does make sense, but I don't think we should expect too big or too quick a turnover on this one. After that, we get the Oneros, also staying well below average. Here we could have the exact reverse. It is so unpopular, you get so small volumes, but that availability immediately becomes too much, and that it does also start to suffer from basically the cheaper production prices. And it's also Galente, of course, quite noticeable on that one. 164 million for the sellers, 143 million for the buyers. So despite these super low prices, buyers are just still pulling at that to go even lower. The Panther kind of confirming that. I was hoping that these Black Ops ships would also show me trends in production costs, and this one is definitely now heading towards $1 billion ISK on average. Just above that for the sellers, 966 million for the buyers. Definitely seeing some pressure here after the bounce due to the rebalancing of these ships. Then we've got the Purifier, again first part of the year, quite consistently going above 35 million, very nice sell opportunities, and then here quite often you could go below 25 million for the buying, so that's again pretty damn good. But now that volatility, yeah, the high point was 30 million ISK. All right, the low point was lower though. We managed to get to 20 million, so this is still in the same range, but it feels a little bit harder to make the trades happen here. 22.5 for the sellers, 22.5 for the buyers. So at the low point, and now we've got sellers willing to dump at that price as well. Scimitar is staying below 200 million ISK, showing a little bit of that pressure as well. Not sure if there's too much to say here. Buyers are at 174 million, so let's see if we can get like a 175-ish to show up. That should be around here, very close to a low point still. Then we have the Widow, all right, doing a bit of a bounce off of $1 billion, but already going back down as well. 1.1 almost for the sellers, below $1 billion for the buyers. And then finally we've got the Zealot that is managing to stay above 200 million as well, but definitely trading below average. So if we're looking for that volatility, you basically need to find the right ship. Something that I'm now also noticing, Caldari, expensive. Cerberus, Caldari, at least average to above average. And then when it comes to Galente, not doing too well. Galente not doing too well. It does look like there is an impact from Tech 2 production costs on these Tech 2 ships as well, that we should keep in mind at the moment. This is not the same as this Hound volatility that I personally don't think is tied too much to production cycles, but rather to usage in nullsec. Stealth bomber fleets always something that's quite risky, and as a result potentially quite profitable for traders. Moving on to the Tech 3 ship market, coming in at 46.15. Let's take a look at these destroyers again. So we have the Confessor, slight trend up, pushing just above 40 million ISK, 41.5 to 42 million for most sellers, 37 million for the buyers, and availability here. It's a full page of new Confessors, but it's not outlandish in its volumes. I would say that this is okay, and feels like we could have a little bit of supply coming in now that the price got above 40 million ISK. Why did that dry up a little bit? Probably because of this. The Hecate went up to 60 million ISK and is still recovering from that. We're talking 46 million, excuse me, for most sellers, 42 million for the buyers, and look at that, another full page, even more than that, of new Confessors coming in, including 82 here, then normal volumes 35. Honestly, for a markup of 10% on the Confessor, this still feels like normal, right? What do you want to bring to the market? Number one, Hecates. Number two so far, definitely the Confessors. Then we have the Jackdaw chart that is just ever so slowly getting together on that 40 million as well. 40 million for the sellers, 36 million for the buyers. Again, another full front page and more in Confessors. And this is perhaps a little bit much in Jackdaws, excuse me, 32, 35. But this is absorbable. This is not 300, 400 Jackdaws coming to the market. So perhaps a little bit too more than expected on what at the moment here is the first one below 40 million ISK, but it is also an incredible ship, of course. The Jackdaw itself, I think, has a lot of uses, and as a result, perhaps just seeing a little bit more production here can easily be absorbed by the markets. And then finally we have the Zwepel that is bouncing up a little bit towards that 40 million range again. 38 million for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. This one is old, so that is Interesting, something you don't see very often. An old order of 68 at 38.2 million is now the top sell order, and other sellers are going on that 40 million range, which is interesting. I would say that this is another sign that, yeah, supply is not just willing to dump these destroyers, and that they are following just regular market forces here. And finally, this is probably we should go back to a couple of older Eve talks then, but probably a massive Zwepel sell order that's basically kept this one in check below that 38 million range. Was probably a lot more than just the 68. And now though, the sellers are saying, all right, Confessors are going for above 40, Hecate 46 million, Jackdaws, whatever I'm making in Zwepels, I'm not gonna dump these below 38.2 million, just a little bit of patience, and I will get 40 million out of the Zwepel, just like any other tactical destroyer. Market stuff that works, that is predictable, and that can work in these tactical destroyers. Pretty cool to see, and something that we don't see very often, right? A couple of old orders are actually the top sell orders at the moment. So the markets, the other sellers, the producers are saying, we're just gonna wait for the market to absorb this, and then we're gonna get our 40 million for the Zwepel. And why wouldn't they? What are you gonna make at the moment? More Zwepels? No, of course not. You're gonna make Confessors, you're gonna make Hecates, because you get that better price out of them. Very cool in my book. Then we have the cruisers. The Legion is starting to lose some of the gains, went up to 160 million, is now at 152. Bars are at 137 million. The Loki is now the one gaining, but it's pretty damn shy, I would say. Well, actually 181 million for the sellers, 154. It must have just happened basically. Oh no, actually 180 on the chart, it's right here. So the potential should be higher, but all right, bit of a jump in the Loki, next up to 180 million. Then we have the Proteus that's recovering from its jump to 180, and then we have the Tengu that is actually going up as well, currently selling for 162 million. And look at the availability then, right? This is now going up in price. Availability is pretty bad. Here is the demand side. It's this one, right? I don't have that good an explanation, because I also think that there's a very big difference in potential in the destroyers, right? Confessor, Hecate, Jackdaw, I feel are pretty much in line with each other, decently well balanced. Zwepel, a little bit less popular, but quite doable. Here I think Loki head and shoulders above the rest. Legion, I've seen that used in Nullsec quite a little bit as one of the tech tree ship doctrines. And then of course we've got the Tengu for PvE, and then we've got the Proteus, I think the least popular one, and yet we see strange volatility, not a lot of availability, regardless of the price, pretty much. Yeah, I don't have too good an explanation as to what's happening here in the cruiser market, but it's nice to take a gamble on, right? I could right now sell my Loki, make a 30 million profit on the one that I bought for 150, and then the Legion, I didn't do it. I'm gonna hope for, I mean, I'm still in that gamble right now. I'm gonna hope for an even better sell opportunity later down the line, and I did buy mine, I think down here at like less than 130 or something like that. So we definitely have a couple of cruisers that are gambled on, or that I could still fly myself once I learn the skills. But this doesn't feel like a market that's as predictable, where here, yeah, 40 million seems to be the right range for all of them. You go above that, you drive a little bit more supply. You go below that, you hope that that other supply starts to up your price. And yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. So for now, I think last week I said it, if there's one that could go up in price, it's this Zwepel, and it looks like it will once these 68 here have been absorbed. And then for the extra product coming in at 52.50, someone basically mentioned, and I wanted to take a look at that the changes, the Pogven itself has had a very big impact on Triglavian stuff availability, you could say, and I think it is very much shown in some of these skill books for Triglavians. Now, on that note, I've been saying that throughout this video that, yeah, I do personally think that perhaps CCP is thinking, all right, Trig stuff, Eden Come stuff, make that very expensive. One note to make there though, they just announced in that video, in that Pulse video, that there is going to be an update and more updates coming to the PvE activities in Pogven with more Triglavian stuff, Eden Come stuff and Drifter stuff. So all of that could of course reverse this situation. But for now, let's take a quick look at that. Capital Precursor Beam, I mean here volumes are up a little bit, price not really moving, but it is something that is quite unique. But large precursor weapons, for instance, right, what's this price range? What are we talking about here? 140,000 ISK and is now selling for 3 million ISK, 445,000 for the buyers. Look at that massive spread. So this is really now dictated by the sellers, the price of it. And as a result, we get this massive jump. So if you had bought before the invasion and your thinking was, not sure who would have thought that, but that everything else in the high sec, all the Trig stuff would all of a sudden just be gone, and that it would be Pogven and that's it. Yeah, you're looking at quite a bit of profit on these skill books. Medium precursor weapon, same jump, went up to 4 million ISK. Is still going for 2.8 million. Then we have the precursor battle cruiser skill, went up to 5 million ISK, is still going for 3.5 million, and yeah, was worth next to nothing. Then we have the precursor battleship, same thing, currently at its high point, 2.7 million. Precursor cruiser, recovering from that, but ever so slowly, definitely still potentially super valuable. Precursor destroyer, look at that, went up to 10 million ISK. The Dreadnought, you know, once you go into the capitals, it's a little bit different, but here's Precursor frigate, still going up at the moment, going for 5 million ISK. It's the easiest to get into, probably the least cost in general, and so as a result probably sees a little bit more demand. And then for instance, small precursor weapon is also taking off as a result, heading for 7.6 million ISK. Feels like it is still quite doable, right? Still pretty doable, but yeah, if we look at the price where we come from, which was 300,000 ISK, that is quite a nice percentage that you could have made on some of these skill books. So another textbook example of things CCP is doing, changes happening to the game that have very, very big impact on the market and are full of potential. Of course, if you're someone that has been running abyssal sites quite often and you actually have just been hoarding the stuff and saying, I mean, I'm just going to put all these skill books in a container because they're worth next to nothing, we're not even going to bother transporting that and trying to sell that. This is your lucky day, because right now you're getting millions of ISK for every single one of these skill books, and that is of course very, very nice, I would say. So this is perhaps again part of CCP's plan, increase the cost and the value, but also does the investment that you're making into flying Triglavian stuff together with Eden Come stuff. I would say that those two would then, you can expect those two to stay in line with each other as a result. So we'll see what the future brings. Of course, there are updates coming to the PvE in Pogven that could put quite a bit of pressure on the price, but how available can CCP make that? If it's only in Pogven, probably not very, because it's not that easy to get there, whereas before, you know, you had stuff spawn all over HiSec, very accessible, and so we had this time of plenty. That seems to be over as well. I personally can't wait to see what happens next, whether it is Triglavian invasion stuff or if CCP goes into a different direction. I'm good to go. I'm very happy with what's happening in Dital at the moment. We're able to keep everything up and running decently steadily. Yeah, I love exploration. We can still do that, so no problem for me. I'm having fun with the game, and yeah, a bit unfortunate that I didn't spend more time in the Abyss, of course, looking at this potential, but that's of course, you know, sometimes some people get lucky and then other people just missed the boat. That happens all the time. Anyways, that's it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.